Humans are funny. If you ask anyone what their strengths are, it's much more likely that you'll get a list of their weaknesses. My next guest, Brandon Wulff, also known as Just Another Autistic Guy, has decided to lean in. In a short period of time, he has quilted up a storm, diving deep into techniques and styles, and possibly inventing a few new ones. So grab your sewing and a cup of tea, and here's my interview with Brandon Wulff. Thank you, Brandon, for being on the show today. You're coming to us from Toronto, right?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Are you originally from Toronto?
No, I'm from London, Ontario. I was born and raised, born just in Simcoe, raised in London, Ontario, to a fiber family.
How did you come to quilting then?
My grandmother used to be able to knit a cable knit sweater in 12 hours.
Wow.
A chunky one. I know. She was like, go, 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 go. She had a whole bus full of crafts, a school bus full of crafts in her backyard. My mom had an actual school bus with the wood burning stoves that she could be out there in the wintertime and crafting. And my mom had a 8-foot loom and a spinning wheel. And she had a sewing machine, which is where I got my first taste of sewing when I was really young. My sister owns a quilt store in London, Ontario. I went to an art high school and I took 3D design as my major, and my minor was textiles. And so I had a little bit of experience of quilting in that textile class. I did one quilt of a partner. It was a king size quilt in 1-inch squares. But you know, when you're a novice quilter and you go to bury a knot and you accidentally cut the top of the quilt top, I did that and I got discouraged. So that one went off to the wayside. But then my sister opened up her shop, I believe 5 years ago. And we really wanted to support her. So I got into quilting and started buying lots of fabric from her. And that's how I really got into it.
Her name is Michael Ann, right?
It is Michael Ann. Yep. Michael Ann Hathaway at Stash.
Michael Ann has such an incredible sense of color.
She does.
I met her at a retreat and she had a wonderful way of curating all sorts of fabric into different bundles.
Yeah, when I teach the class, I always say it always starts with the fabric store. You know, talk to the curators of the fabric that you're going to be buying. You know, do they have a modern collection? Do they have, you know, more of a country feel? What kind of fabrics do they like to curate? And that's how I pick the stores I go to.
Now, you just dove into quilting so fast. I could not believe how prolific you were when you first arrived at the Toronto Modern Guild. What is it about quilting that you love so much?
Well, I was, as I said, I did three-dimensional design, and three-dimensional design in school was great, but it's not very practical. There's lots of equipment that you need. There's lots of tools you need, and I didn't have that. So I did painting, and I loved oil painting, and I had lots of art shows that were painted shows, but the paint fumes really got to me. So I'm autistic, and being autistic, there's a lot of sensory issues. And not only was I getting high, but I was also having sensory issues from the paint. So I decided to not do anything for a long period of time. So when my sister opened her quilt store, it was kind of a match made in heaven that I had taken textiles already and that she needed customers. So I just started. And you know, the prolific has to do with being autistic. Is this part of being autistic is that you have a narrow focus. And my narrow focus has to do with quilting, quilting business, any application of quilting. So you'll see that my quilting goes into furniture, and it goes into, right now I'm doing a lot of visible mending. Honestly, if you're a quilter and you're looking for money to buy more for your stash, visible mending is an excellent source of revenue. But yeah, I like to diversify my skills and go into embroidery and apply to furniture and to other mediums that I can.
Well, I noticed when you're quilting styles, and you can see it in your Instagram feed as well, that you take a style and you explore it. You don't, you went through your series of everyday objects.
Yeah.
Is that just your autism coming out, that you just dive in and take it to as far as it can go?
I'm I'm autodidactic, so and that means I'm self-learning. So I'm a see-do learner, so I have to see someone do it, and then I can just do it. So yeah, part of being autodidactic is I take an element of a medium, and then I thoroughly explore that as much as I can, and then apply that knowledge to exploring something else. So I did half square triangles, or I did, sorry, flying geese at the beginning of my career. I did a lot of them. And I did a blanket similar to this, but now I'm doing half square triangles with just a thin little bolt of color between the two half square triangles, just to brighten it up, because I'm actually playing with the color mostly and how it tickles my mind. And it does tickle my mind, the color combinations. And then now I'm playing, as you can see with the one behind me, with adding a third element of sashing, which is going to be that green, which I hadn't done before. So now I'm playing with more layers of sashing, and what does sashing do, and how many textures can I create within one quilt. So yeah, I learn progressively. Definitely one thing gives me skills to explore the next thing, for sure.
So you say you want to see it done, and then you take it and explore it. Have you been doing it with YouTube videos? Have you been doing it with in-person classes? Has your sister been teaching you?
So I've mostly am self-taught online. I learn a lot through online. A lot of your videos I've watched. I'm a big fan. Any beginner student, I always say, you got to get it done quilts, because she's no nonsense. She's right to the point, and she's very clear, and here's the science behind it. And I like that. You speak my language. So a lot of it is that experimental mentality that I have. It's just fabric, you know? And I see a lot of quilters who really treat fabric like it's gold. I look at fabric as it's a renewable resource. Yes, it's expensive to produce, and there's a lot of environmental stuff, but we could plant more seeds and get more fabric if I really needed to. So it's just fabric in my mind. And if I make a mistake, then it's really easy for me to just cut it up and try again. Which I have a tendency of doing. If I'm not happy with something, I'll just cut it up and rearrange it, and it all works out in the long run as an improv quilt.
Well, I remember we did a block of the month challenge, and you won it, and you brought a quilt the next month, and we're going, and you said, and this is what I used my blocks for. And we're going, well, what happened? And then we realized you used them for the center of the flying geese. You had cut up these 9-inch blocks into flying geese.
And I love that. I like looking at those traditional blocks and saying, well, what can I make with it that's a little bit more modern or different, or what happens? I like asking the question, what happens when I do this? It's very important in my work. What happens when, you know, I put piping in the middle? What happens when I use bias tape to make my everyday object quilts? What happens? Like, how far can I stretch this medium? And I think that's a really big question for me is, how far can I stretch it?
So does that mean that all your fabrics in your stash are equal? There's no favorites, there's no specials, there's no ones that you can't cut. Everything's equal. Everything has equal opportunity.
Everything has equal opportunity because I don't keep a stash.
Okay.
I have one cupboard full of fabric, and it's usually leftover fabric from projects that I've already done. And I keep enough around that if I wanted to improv a piece, that I could improv a piece. But for the most part, I buy fabric specifically for a quilt. And then I'll add a little bit from the collection. But no, I don't have any fabric that's special. I do have my favorites for sure, but I know that fabric's going to come and it's going to go, and it's meant to be used and turned into a quilt. So I hope that fabric's going to be in a quilt somewhere. But yeah, I cut up all my fabric. I have no favorites that I keep and preserve, and that's not what it's about. It's about making things for me.
So do you call up your sister and have her curate a bundle for you, or do you drive down there, or do you shop online?
I shop online. I go literally from one end of the store to the other. I prefer to do that online. If I'm in the store, then I'm usually bouncing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I drive them all crazy. But online, I will literally go from page to page, and I'll pick out all the ones that I want. And when I buy big, it's big. It's a big order, especially if I'm doing one of my biscottis. My biscottis can take up to 25 different fabrics. I have to thoroughly curate, my quilt quilts as I go through the stores.
So I have two questions now. What is a biscotti and quilt?
Yep.
And two, how much fabric do you buy? Like what kind of cut? Like a half yard cut or a fat quarter?
Yeah, so for my preference is for a width of length or a skinny quarter if I have to, or a half. Generally, I like to buy in full yards. I like to have a full yard, and then there's always that little extra left over for my cupboard. Or if there's something that I want to make extra of, like a pillow, or because I've been doing pillows as well. What is a biscotti? A biscotti is a cookie. It's an Italian cookie. It's twice baked. So they make a dough and they put it in the oven in one lump. They bake it and then they bring it out, they cool it off, they cut it into slices, turn it on their sides, they rebake it. So it's nice and golden brown. And so a biscotti quilt is a quilt top that I make. It's a log cabin style quilt top that's ginormous. And then I put it on point and I cut it up into blocks. And then I reassemble those pieces. And you get this gorgeous ombre kind of feeling. And I've used it a lot for headboards, mostly wall hangings. I would definitely define it as a wall quilt. I teach a short class, which is 1 hour. I take you through everything that I do when I design a biscotti quilt in 1 hour. You have a pen and a coffee, and we do the biscotti. And then I teach also, I'm introducing this fall a 2-day, 3 hours per day, make the first quilt top the first day and then chop it up and reassemble it the second day over 2 weekends. So I'm excited about those. But biscotti's done really well for me. And the neat thing about that is that you can't make two biscottis that are exactly the same ever. It's impossible. It's totally built on randomness, and your decisions and my decisions are never going to be exactly the same. And even if I tried to make the same quilt twice, I could cut it at a slightly different angle, or it could bow a little bit more, causing me to take a little slice out, and then that makes a difference. So there's just literally no way you can make two of these quilts the same.
I think I know which one you're talking about. It was
I have one hanging
almost like a yes.
That's the biscotti. Did a table runner as well.
Okay.
That was really long and skinny. It was more like this one. I did the headboard, which is bigger than this, equal proportions, but bigger. And then I did a table runner that was very much like this. That was a 10-foot table runner for 14 people, 14-person table. I was like, my little studio wasn't big enough to take the picture of that. And it was intended for a cottage, but it didn't make it to the cottage. It made it to the city house, which means I'll probably have to make another one in the future. Hopefully.
Your proficiency extends to quilting. Now, are you doing your quilting at a sit-down machine, or do you have a long arm? Right now, I'm doing all of my quilting on domestic machines. I am a huge fan of Silly Moon rulers. Kelly and I are good friends, and I have learned how to do whole cloth quilts on domestic with these machines, but have this right behind this camera. On the other side is an empty space that I just cleared out for a Q16 that's hopefully coming this weekend. I'm so excited about the perfect stitches. That's all I'm looking forward to, is those perfect stitches. Well, it'll be a little bit easier on your shoulders as well, because you won't have to reef everything quite so much.
I don't have a problem with that. I have learned to sit on a stool that's a little bit higher than a chair would be. So I find that if I'm sitting over what I'm working on, I don't have as much, but if I'm sitting down too low, then I have a lot of shoulder pain and back pain. And maybe that's a tip that people can work in there.
I have to remember to breathe. I'm always holding my breath.
I play choir music while I ruler work. And my husband is like, "Why do you play choir music?" And I'm like, "Because it keeps me calm." So I'm not sweating all the time, because it's work. It's not easy to, you got to worry about, hitting that needle on those rulers, and that's stressful stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Clunk, or the near misses just send your heart racing. Are you the same way with rulers that you are with other techniques, you just take it and see what it can do and experiment and play?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'm very improv with my rulers. I don't plan them out. And I don't like traveling in long arming. I find, especially with furniture, because you're so close up to the furniture, that when you travel, you see that little bit of the travel. By not accepting that I have to bury a lot of threads, I'm able to do shapes that other people can't do, because they're always trying to travel from shape to shape, where I'm like, okay, I just pop this shape right here or pop this shape right here. And I think I get to play a little bit more than people who travel, because they are always constantly thinking of how to go from shape to shape.
So those are all the ways that quilting works with your abilities. How does quilting challenge you?
So autism is a nonverbal social communication difference with a narrow focus, which we talked about, which is the quilting, and or repetitive stereotype behaviors. So we'll talk about those last two, which are the repetitive stereotype behaviors and the narrow focus. We talked about the narrow focus, but the repetitive stereotype behaviors can be anything from rocking back and forth, toe tapping, twirling your hair, biting your nails, things that you do repeatedly over and over again as a form of self-stimulation. I don't do a lot of that. I was taught as a young person not to do that. It's not socially acceptable to do those things, but I've always had the narrow focus. So how quilting challenges me is that it's often in a large group, so guilds, and the nonverbal social communication difference is that I don't speak body language, I don't get nuance, I don't get double entendres. Women are the keeper of social rules. So being around a lot of group of women who are competing socially amongst themselves for rank, and me not understanding the various subgroups within a group, or the politics, or the nuance, groups can be really challenging for me, which is also probably plays into why I'm so prolific, is because, I really want to just kind of keep my nose to what I really like doing the most, which is quilting. And I kind of stay out of all of the politics because it's just too much for me. My system shuts down. I become overwhelmed. I become an anxious mess. So I don't participate, and quilting is the cure for that. So yeah, large groups is the challenge for me. Getting to know the community has been a challenge for me, though I think I'm doing a pretty good job of it now, navigating the community online at least. I'm anxious about everyone going back to face-to-face. Disabled community has been asking for Zoom kind of conferences forever. And we were always told, it's not possible, it's not possible. And then within 3 months of the pandemic starting, that accommodation was made for everybody. And so I'm having a bit of a hard time with, accommodation made for everybody slowly being taken away. And I hope that there are elements of it. And I see elements of it sticking around. Like Sakwa does a lot of online stuff. I know that some modern quilt guild groups are actually going to continue to do some virtual stuff. So that really kind of cuts out, the virtual stuff really cuts out a lot of the social nuance. People have to be a little bit more straightforward and upfront, not so implied language when they're on Zoom. So that cuts a little bit of that out for me. The breakout sessions can be challenging for me because they're usually more intimate. But other than that, the people I meet are for the most part really friendly and very helpful, and they want to see me do well. But again, it's just that face-to-face stuff. I just don't get body language. So it's the challenge for me.
Well, I find even as Canadians, a lot of our talk or our speak has a lot of sarcasm and that double meaning in it.
Which is ironic because autistic people are very sarcastic people, but we just don't get sarcasm. Which is hilarious. But we're very sarcastic people and funny. We're very funny people, but we're not funny to each other.
Well, I've actually found Zoom a challenge for that reason, because I communicate through sarcasm. It just doesn't work on Zoom. It doesn't. You miss all the other cues that go with it, and you're going, okay, this is what I really mean, or I didn't mean what you thought you heard.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that you do that because, at the beginning of all my talks, I say to my participants, I'm like, okay, so I am autistic and I do have a nonverbal communication and I have a tendency of saying things that have double meaning, although I'm not intending the double meaning. Sometimes they can be really offensive to people that I have like no clue at all. So let's just check in on a perception and versus intentions. This is what I'm intending. What are you perceiving and help? Because once you explain to me what the double meaning is, I get it. But I just need to have someone explain it to me. So rather than get mad at me, just what you say, what is this? What is the intention? What is the perception?
I have seen that you've gone on retreats and things like that. How does it work out?
I've gone on one retreat. I went on one with my sister. It was my sister's retreat, so I was able to hide with her. I'm a pretty social person. I like to socialize. It's me missing the nuance or the anxiety of saying something wrong. Because autistic people we're really blunt. We value the truth. Neurotypical people, they value the information to be presented in a palatable manner. So that doesn't necessarily, it's not very cohesive. It's about, the pathological liar versus the compulsive truth teller. The compulsive truth teller is always looked like the jerk. And the pathological liar is not trusted, right? So it's kind of that balance. How do you maintain that balance in conversation? I have to be really mindful. That's my anxiety is about, saying something and not realizing I'm saying something and nobody pointing it out, but holding it against me. So retreats are pretty lax. They're really relaxed. Teaching can be a problem. That's where I run into some problems. Ongoing groups. So like guilds, weekly meeting kind of things, if they're long-term, I start to get really confused because I build up in my mind, what did they mean by this? What did they mean by that? What did they mean by this? What did they mean by that? And then it all spirals out of control and I can't figure it out. So I go and sew.
So would you consider going to Quilt Canada?
Next year, yes, I'm going to Quilt Canada.
In Halifax?
In Halifax, yes. I have a few quilts I'm going to enter. I was going to enter this year, but then I started working on the biscotti I just showed you, and I really, really liked it. And I really love this quilt, so I'm going to enter that one for sure, because I didn't just quilt it with the ruler work in each square, but I also hand stitched the seams with a cross stitch, all of the seams. So I'm very interested in entering that one. A couple of other ones I want to enter, but last year when I was making that one, I'm like, the only one I really want to enter is the one I'm making right now. And so I said no to actually entering, but I am looking forward to entering that next year.
Do you consider yourself a modern or a traditional quilter?
I'm quilting for really, 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 really extremely modern, like some crazy luxurious homes that are done in the Muskokas and done by very well-known designers and architects. So I think I would call myself more of a contemporary quilter. I feel that modern is too clean lines. It's clean, and mine isn't necessarily about clean. It's more about random. Even the one behind me, there's a lot of random in that one. It's not done intentionally. It's done relying on random. So I also believe in wabi-sabi, which is the Japanese art of imperfection and appreciating imperfection. So, while I'm making this, if one of my quilt blocks gets turned around, it's not necessarily a big deal. It might be for me, but in a biscotti, it doesn't matter if one gets turned around. It works. So it's about embracing that kind of imperfection.
I must compliment you on the choice of colors in that quilt behind you. Those blues look iridescent.
Thank you. I think it's the purple that's setting off the blue.
Yeah.
And then the green is just going to kick it up. I'm just auditioning this green now, but I think the green will just kick it off just a little bit more.
Yeah. Very nicely done.
Thank you.
And you ordered these online?
No, some of this fabric is from my sisters. Some of this fabric, I learned that Christina works at Fabric Spark. Last Friday, I went to see her and bought a bunch of this fabric, the blues and all of the blues I bought from Fabric Spark.
So how long does it take you to make a quilt?
Not long.
Like I'm thinking you bought it last week and it's already cut up and in a quilt and you're putting it in sashing.
And I had other projects on the go too. So I had to finish the yellow quilt. I could do a quilt in less than a week. No problem. A full-size quilt.
I find my mind likes to let the fabric percolate, and sometimes it percolates a long time.
Yeah. For me, I just have this sense of a specific color combinations that tickle a certain part of my brain because I'm a sleuth babe, right?
I love you saying tickle your brain. Yeah,
it does. It has to stimulate my brain a little bit. And that's the color combinations I really, really like are the ones that they do that. They just play off of each other in a way that tickles my brain. That's all I know.
It's such a great saying. I'm going to have to say, my friend Brandon says.
Yeah.
Tickle your brain.
It doesn't tickle my brain. I'm not doing it. Yeah. So certain colors just do that. Like yellow does that for me naturally. I don't need any other color near yellow, but yellow does that for me. Peach and brown not peach, pink and brown, like a dusty pink and brown mixed together. That totally does it for me. All the sunset colors do it for me together. The silvers, the grays, the silvers, and the blues next to the purple are just so lovely. And it has to be a very specific purple. It couldn't be any purple. It had to be bright and pungent and to set it off. And it had to match close to this one here.
Are those ones that you got at Fabric Spark, or you just saw them online and luckily the photograph and the resolution was correct?
So the grays I picked all online. And it's just, I happen to pick what happens to look good. There's very rarely a fabric I buy that I don't like. Okay. Especially because, as you say, my sister's a really good fabric curator. There's not a lot of fabrics I don't like from her store.
Do you label your quilts?
I don't label. Well, I do label them. I have an iron-on patch that has my logo, which is a B with a letter B underneath it. They're very cute. I can actually show you one right here. That's the logo, and I always iron it on, and then I blanket stitch around it. I don't put the title on because when someone buys a quilt from me, I want it to be an experience. So you get a box with my logo on it. You open the box and you see a card there with my logo on it. You open up the card, you get all of the provenance of the piece, why I made it, what it's made out of, how to take care of it, who I gave it to, everything that an appraiser is going to want in the future. You get a magnet. You get another free sticker. It's all wrapped in tissue paper, and the logo is, when you open up the tissue paper, there's the logo is right there. It's presented to you, and then you get to open up the quilt. And I think that's really important for the type of clients that I'm working with. They're paying a lot of money for these quilts, so they need the extra stuff, and I think it makes them feel good, and it makes them feel good about the purchase. So labeling for me, not so important. Marking them is important though. So I do have my logo on it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you and hearing more of your story. If people want to get a hold of you for a lecture or a commission, or just follow your Instagram feed, where's the best way to find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. We'll start with Instagram at Justanotherautisticguy. So on that particular feed, I post a lot of my everyday. I post a lot. So if you don't have a lot of followers, I'm going to inundate your feed. So follow me at B Wulff and Company. So I can post all my finished work there, and then B Wulff and Company on Facebook. And then bwulffandcompany.com is where you can purchase my classes or hire me to do some cross stitching, or you can hire me to make you a quilt.
Thanks again. And I hope to see you in person one day.
Yay. It's happening soon.
It's happening soon.
I hope you've enjoyed my interview with Brandon Wulff and begin to look out for the parts of quilting that tickle your brain and lean in the way Brandon has. If you're like me and want to sign up for his biscotti class, I'll leave a link to his website in the notes below, as well as his social media and contact information. Next up on Karen's Quilt Circle is Vanessa Genier, and we will be talking about her initiative, Quilts for Survivors, and its part in how we reconcile the truths about our residential school system. Be sure to subscribe so you're notified when it goes live. Next time you're in your sewing room, make sure you have Karen's Quilt Circle playing on in the background. I have interviewed so many amazing people in this series. Let one inspire you. And check out my last video on what you need to ask yourself before you buy a new sewing machine. Take care, and I'll see you next time.